Hi, my name is Al Gallo, and I'm a volunteer with AARP Colorado. AARP Colorado believes the best years begin at 50, and we're out to prove it with our program, the new 50 Plus. It's a mindset that says we are better than ever. As part of that get up and go attitude, we are hosting Wine Walk Wednesday webinar. It's just another opportunity for AARP to encourage active adults to learn more, play more, and exceed all expectations. We can see and feel the trends. People 50 and older are more active, both physically and mentally, than ever before. We aren't slowing down. In fact, we are preparing ourselves to do more of the things we love. So many older adults are exercising and eating right daily. We are taking the time to learn new things and know the importance of life balance, making sure that leisure and fun are significant parts of our healthy lifestyles. In that lively spirit, we welcome you to enjoy our Wine Walk Wednesday webinar. This week, we will be talking about food-friendly wines and holiday dinners. While we hope you learn something new and exciting, we want you to enjoy yourself, relax, and most importantly, have some fun on you.
Thanks, Al, and welcome everybody to Wine Walk Wednesdays. I am your host, John Yu, and this month, we're going to be talking about food-friendly wines. So grab a glass, and I hope you have a couple, and join us for this journey. We're going to be talking about hosting holiday dinners, some charcuterie fun, some wine pairing tips, a little bit of wine gifting holidays for the holidays, as well as New Year's sparkling preview. So one thing I like to talk about with holiday hosting for dinners is that it gives us a chance to bring our stories together and make it very intimate. Share our stories and also experience a new thing, new memories with family and friends. So there's so many questions that are going to come about this year. Controlling the situation for our dinner, we need to figure out, what do I need? What should I make? What should your friends and family bring? As well as food-friendly wines. What are they? As well as a couple shortcuts that I want to suggest for everybody. First and foremost, though, what do I need? House rules is where I like to start this year. Again, we are in the middle of a very different time. And with the pandemic, I want to create I would recommend making an intimate dinner this year. Keeping it intimate will allow for you to limit the amount of guests, keep it small, as well as creating quality time for all your friends and family. This will also make it really strategic when making a holiday theme for the dinner. Again, having your guests bring something that's themed with food and or the wine is going to really guide everybody so that there's not too many questions, makes it really fun, and again, allows for that quality time for these smaller gatherings and for the dinner, holiday dinners. So what should we make, right? Big question here. With very little people in our dinner, we're going to be looking at different things. More sides, more entrees, but smaller portions. And also creating a charcuterie board as a great alternative, because the charcuterie board is going to make kind of a piece de resistance for your table. It's going to be very lovely, very inviting, at the same time create a lot of variety for wine pairing. With that being said, the theme and how to theme those tastings is going to be important. So let's do it by styles, by different countries, as well as particular food pairings. It's going to create a really lovely atmosphere. It's going to create a game plan for you and your family and allow for something a little more engaging. So by pairing with wine styles, you could do like all sparkling wines for the holidays. Let's say New Year's coming up, we could do all champagnes or different sparkling wines from every region. When you're pairing with or doing a wine theme by country, you could do all wines from France. So that way you have a sparkling, a red, a white, and a dessert. You could also do classic pairings. And I'm going to go a little deeper into that, as well as some atypical things and some things to look out for. But what are food-friendly wines? So in general, we're looking at some sparkling wines, French white wines, American white wines, some Italian red wines, Spanish red wines, and some dessert wines. And we're going to have quite a bit on our hands. But before I continue, I want to point out down below here, you're going to see like 8 little buttons. There's 2 sheets on the 5th button, and that's going to allow for you to click on it, the handout section. Go ahead, click on those, and take a look, because if you take a look at those handouts, you're going to see kind of a walk with and also some pairing tips and recommendations that I have for you for the show and for later. And again, please, if you have any questions or any ideas, comments, we have this little studio chat box. Throw in some questions, throw in some ideas. I have Sarah Forbes who said, we didn't have any of the items on the list, so we are branching out and trying out a Stella Rosa Blueberry. Wasn't expecting it to be a sparkling wine. I love it though. And you know what? No pressure. We have so many options. The idea of food pairing is really the versatility of what you can do with those wines. So don't worry about it. I don't want there to be any pressure about what to bring. And that's really what this show is going to be about today, is creating the opportunity and the tools for you to pair, balance, and match those wines, no matter what you have. So as we continue, let's look at how to break it down. Both food type and wine types are going to be interesting and important when pairing. You're looking at something that's bubbly and acidic, something like a sparkling wine. This is going to allow for bright acidity and great pairing with food that are like fish, oysters, something very refreshing and leaning towards acidity. Then you have refreshing white wines, like Jennifer Ostrom has a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, just like last time, which is awesome, because this is going to really pair with those oily, rich flavors. It's what I consider a perpendicular pairing, where you have one bold flavor kind of counteracting with the other flavor. And so something like that. I know last class we were talking about rich, almost like a sauteed mushroom or pork loin, tenderloin type pairing. Those are going to be great because they balance each other. They come together and sometimes create a new flavor. And I love that you are still rocking the New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, because we're going to show you something that will work very well in tandem to that, which leads me to the next wine, which is soft and gentle white wines. Now, with soft and gentle white wines, I like showing something like a California Chardonnay. In contrast to that, the refreshing white, I have an Alsatian Pinot Gris. Now, they're very gold in color. They're very deep and rich, but one is going to be very fruit driven. The other one, the California Chardonnay, is going to have that gentle richness about it, a little bit of creamy character. That's going to go really well with creamy foods like cheeses, as well as sauces that are really gentle. Now, the last 3 you have are acidic red wine, like the Italian Chianti, as well flavors, and also continues to make you hungry, which is very important for something that is going to be rich, like poultry dishes. Again, classic. Oh, if you can hear me now. It's going to be classic for rich poultry dishes, as well as allowing for you to pair with something like ham. With the roasts, and we were seeing Leslie had Apothic Dark. Apothic Dark is going to be going kind of really in line with these roasts, these heavier meals. So here I have a Spanish red. It's a Garnacha, but you can use Crianza, Rioja, any style really that's going to be tannic, dry, and really bold. Those flavors are going to go well with roasts, heavy meats, red meats, because they're prone to having more protein that really goes well with the tannins. And pairing that allows for it to kind of ease up on your palate. It's not so harsh, it's not so dry, because when you're pairing it, when you're eating or chewing with it, it almost gives it something to distract it with on the tannins. But lastly, we have pungent food with sweet red and white wines. And with that, I brought 2 actually. This one here, is going to be a Pedro Jimenez from Spain, and then the other one is going to be a port from Portugal. And they're going to be different tools for different styles of food. So Michael Jones just mentioned that he's enjoying a very good Long Valley Ranch winemaker's blend. Tell us more about it. Is it red? Is it white? Curious. It sounds like it's a red blend. And do you know what the grapes are? That's always a fun question. With Sarah, oh, you two mentioned the Apothic Dark. I'm curious. I've never actually had it, but I wonder if it's very tannic or if it's actually very bold and rich. So on for the next slide, let's talk about some of those shortcuts that we were looking at. Quality shortcuts can be fun, and they're actually very useful because let's say you're doing it more potluck style. You have your family or friends bringing in different meals. Sometimes everybody runs out of time, and I like having those alternatives. So having, for me, Thai food works really well. Tacos, something that has not too heavy flavors, as well as local foods, because you can relate to local foods, local restaurants very well. Now, when you're shopping, the alternative is kind of a quick checklist for foods. Hummus, cheese, fruits, or deli meats, and making your own grilled meats, as well as veggies and healthy finger foods. And with the veggies, we're going to show you some really fun ways to make it both raw and cooked in style. Give it some complexity in texture and flavor. So with charcuterie fun, I love it because it's so engaging. You can have fun, you can decorate it. Again, it's the centerpiece for your dinner and your house. So when you're getting things ready, it's a great way for you to pre-plan and prep everything in advance. And the reason why that's important these days is because the time, the amount of cooking prep that it's going to take, sometimes pulling out some cheeses and letting people dive in while you're cooking or during the meal is going to be an option to allow those flavors to mingle, because all of these wines that we have here are going to basically play off of one another. And I'm going to show you how. But first, let's divide the charcuterie board. And how do you do it? I kind of recommend 5 different ways. Using proteins like meats and nuts, as well as some veggies, both cooked and raw, cheeses with varying textures, and then you also have fruits with different citrus and sweetness levels, and dips that have this, creamy, rich, citrusy and fruity, and also, variety and texture that really allows you to take a break from these heavier meals or these standard flavors here. So, Michael, you were also mentioning that wine was a Shiraz, Merlot, Petit Syrah, and Petit Verdot blend. So definitely a warm climate, really ripe fruit. That sounds really nice. And Monterey is a relatively warm climate winemaking region. So really, that we're going to get into almost like Paso Robles and Central Coast style wines, because that screams barbecue to me, and I love that. So when we go into these foods, we kind of designed some of this in terms of raw food versus cooked food. Because again, this is going to save you time. If you have the same ingredients, but you're able to make 2 different types of foods, it's really a fun way to diversify your dinners for the holidays, create more opportunity for you to pair with your wines, as well as make it easy on your budget, as well as easy and versatile for your guests. So that way they aren't necessarily pinned to eating one thing, but they have a variety of things. So I show like veggie sticks with carrots and cooked raisins, as well as spinach salad versus sauteed spinach, mixed nuts versus roasted nuts. And I have both on that handout down there on the 5th button, as well as the next upcoming slides. We're going to have a lot of different ideas for you guys to have, because again, these wines are going to be great. And what you're drinking, keep giving me more feedback as to what you'd like to see too, what you want to engage with in terms of, let's say you have foie gras and you don't know what to pair with it. We'll get you some ideas for that. So layers. The charcuterie board is so important to have layers, as well as a theme, a pattern. with those 5 different techniques that I was talking about, it allows you to create that pattern with this little diagram to show you how having let's say mixed nuts as one protein for one little spot and actually like a nice roast or lamb in another spot can counteract and balance and play off of the wines that you're looking at. Because again, these wines aren't necessarily going with one food, one wine, one food, one wine. You want a little variety. So this gets us to our first slide. My dad, who's an excellent chef, actually made 12 dishes for you this week. And in order to show you the variety, we kind of had to make everything. There's only so much you can find on the internet. So he was gracious enough to build these different dishes so we can see both hot and cold foods and how we can really create really interesting pairings. So with spinach, we made a spinach artichoke salad as well as sauteed spinach with garlic. And right away, I like to start off with something sparkling. Again, it's a great way to invite your guests, welcome them in, have your family treated with something that they might, open up their palate before dinner. And when you smell it and taste it, I have a sparkling rosé from the south of France. And the rosé is interesting because it's strawberry driven. Has a lot of citrus, almost a watermelon character depending on how ripe it is. But the bubbles, the effervescent, being traditional production, you're going to see this fine carbonation. And it's a little tricky in the light, but you're going to always see these really gentle bubbles coming up. What that does is it creates this brisk, rich, mousse-like mouthfeel. It allows for it to go really well with creams and cheeses, like feta cheese, as well as pair with the acidity that's in a lot of your vegetable dishes. Spinach, a salad, these are going to be really captivating and almost do like a perpendicular pairing, a parallel pairing where they match in acidity as well as freshness. Now with the sauteed spinach, I would actually go a little richer. Alsatian Pinot Gris is what I have here. That's both fruit forward, but still high in acidity because it's cold climate wine. And when you smell it, it's almost like a salad on its own. Fruit driven, peaches, apricots, a lot of stone fruit. But this is going to be, sometimes it will have a little bit of sweetness. It has a little bit of a residual sugar to it. And that elevates the body in the wine and allows for that richness for something like sauteed garlic, which might naturally have butter or olive oils, these rich, like structural elements to your dishes to balance well with your refreshing white wine. So that way it cleans up the palate as well as gives a dynamic, rich complement to your pairings. Now, with this next slide, we have pico de gallo and elote and queso fresco dip. Now, this is something that I've been experimenting with my family in the last couple of years because I like using these for the holidays to add a little bit of pizzazz, give it a lot of color, and also create something that's both refreshing and creamy and rich and warming. By having these hot and cold dips, it allows for you to incorporate it in smaller sizes around the charcuterie board or your spread and allow for a little variety because after you eat something that's heavy, like all these cheeses, you might want something that's light and bright and have like your champagne with pico de gallo or Pinot Gris with the pico de gallo because the Pinot Gris is actually going to catch on those citrus fruit, citrus vegetables, the acidity in the lime that's from the salsa and capture a livelier balance to your meal because it'll clean up the palate from anything heavy that you've had. Now, vice versa, if you want something that's going to be rich and almost like a heavier pairing, California Chardonnay actually will go really well with this elote. And elote is a fun way to make a quick and easy like side dish and then pair with something that's creamy like a California Chardonnay because naturally, mine in particular isn't overzealously creamy. It's got more oak. You can smell like coconut, dill, almost like a sweeter vanilla tone to it. But with Chardonnay, it's not dessert like vanilla. It's just rich. And by adding something that's like a creamy corn, really goes well with it. Notice that the crackers and the chips, they're going to add a little bit of a bready richness to it in a different aspect. As we go into some of the healthier options, we're going to look into carrots. And I know carrots are very easy to come by. Everybody has some in their fridge. Doing carrots and celery dip with hummus is one of my quickest and easiest like side dishes. I love it because it gives you texture, it gives you variety, crunchiness, as well as creaminess, and it pairs really well with something that's going to be heavier and heartier. And as we get into this dinner, we look at something like caramelized carrots and raisins, which is going to be a sweeter, almost more savory dish. And this is actually where we can skip along and do something like sherry or port, because having something like this, you're going to get prune-like oxidative flavors, a little bit of a sweetness, but because it's salty and because it's oily, an oilier dish, it actually doesn't compete for sweetness. It contrasts it and allows for those sweet, nutty, oxidative tones to pair really well with some of those caramelized characters. So after that, let's go and build the dish, do a little bit more variety, as well as play on some of these healthier foods. So we took beets and we're like, what do we do with beets? And beet caprese salad was what we came up with. And Dad knocked it out of the park because caprese on its own has this vegetal, refreshing like palate balancing character that really complements a dish. It doesn't make your meal too heavy. You can eat plenty of it, but also mix around and makes the palate or makes your actual plate very colorful and lively. And with beets, it's heavy in antioxidants, just like your red wines. So naturally, I'm actually going to pair the Chianti or Chianti Classico with the caprese, because that acidity is going to go really well with these cool vegetables, but at the same time, you're going to get this rustic, cherry, almost like mulch-like earthy component about the wine. And because it's fresh, it's not overly tannic, it's not going to overpower your caprese, and it'll go really well in transitioning with these marinated mushrooms, citrus green beans, because that citrus won't contrast. They both have a good acidity to balance with the flavors. Even though it's a red wine, usually we're thinking, heavy meats or, with red wine and white wines with light fish. But this gives you a little bit of play with your proteins, with the mushrooms, and with the green beans, giving it a citrusy alternative to pairing with a red wine, which is something that we don't normally actually do. It's not a classic pairing. Now, when we go into classic pairings, this is something that I'm looking at with our next slide here. Cheeses, dips, some jams. Now, I recommended doing like a healthier sausage, doing turkey sausage. We added sauerkraut and Dad's red cabbage. That gives a little bit of sweetness and sourness. And now you add some slices of fruit like apples, and now you have almost every one of these wines that we selected for you can pair with it. If you want something citrusy, it'll go with the sparkling. If you want something that has a little bit more richness to go with your turkey sausage, go with the Chardonnay. If you want to add fruity character, you can go like with the red sauerkraut, you can do the Chianti and the Pinot Gris from Alsace. And with the sweeter flavors, you have on that last board a jam or a jelly that goes really well with the crackers and cheese. And that saltiness will go really nicely with your dessert. Now, with some of the heavier, earthier flavors, Spanish Rioja is great because it takes the fat, takes the richness, and gives it a little bit more earth, a little bit more leathery character, and goes really well with nutty, oxidized flavors. So that pistachio goat cheese dip is something where you can make a light, quick snack out of it and have a heavy, bold red wine, because the acidity from the goat cheese is going to make the wine brisk, light, and actually, in general, like Spanish wines, they have bold alcohol, and it basically makes it a richer pairing. Um, with Garnacha, it is fruit forward, has a little bit of acidity, and complements those flavors in a way that goat cheese is magic for. I love having it. A little healthier, but with the pistachios, now you're creating that oxidized, nutty flavor that with the port is actually going to go really well because you're going to get dark berries, dark cherries, blackberry, plum. They're rendered, they're like pie-like on the palate. And depending on the style, if you get a tawny port, it's going to give you that nutty oxidized flavor that's going to go really well with the chocolate, as well as the pistachio dip. Again, contrasting, because these wines can do so much with different flavors, but they don't have to be classic, like one for one, eye for eye. We want to make sure that your wines are getting the best bang for their buck. Sarah just asked, which wines do you suggest for traditional Thanksgiving food pairing? So traditional Thanksgiving food pairing, I would actually recommend the Alsatian Pinot Gris. I've been talking about it for maybe 7 years because it is so food friendly. You can do Alsatian Riesling, German Riesling, and even Alsatian Pinot Gewürztraminer. They have a little bit of sweetness that goes really well with both salty foods, acidic foods, and also has a gentle richness that cleans the palate, but allows for it to balance with a lot of those heavier foods for the holidays. Things like cranberries or cranberry chutney, that's going to pair with Pinot Gris in a way because they're balancing with fruit acidity. Now, with turkey and things like that, Pinot Gris as well as Beaujolais are another classic. So again, with Beaujolais, that is kind of synonymous for November. We have Beaujolais Nouveau that comes out during that season, as well as classic Beaujolais, which are a little more tannic, a little hardier. They're bigger wines, but bigger as in Pinot Noir. They have more earth, more gusto to it. Vice versa, though, looking at all of these wines, these are kind of recommendations both for Thanksgiving as well as all the other holidays coming up for you guys. Because again, food-friendly wines should be able to pair with not just one thing, but a variety of things. So we go into this next one, which is something I'm going to surprise you about, because classically we would look at steak, right, as a regular. I was traveling out there a couple years ago, and I realized they love to carve up the steak, serve it kind of in slices for everybody to share, and it becomes very intimate. And I thought, when we're having Thanksgiving, intimate family and close friends this year, this might not for you, but definitely look at. They're going to create. Oh, sorry. Looks like I was breaking up a little bit there, so I'll back up a little bit. But Sarah, you were saying about Thanksgiving, Turkey Day. Definitely looking at these flavors, we want something that leans a little more with acidity. That's really food friendly. And if they're red wines or if they're white wines, it's going to be great because they have this propensity to go well with both richness, salty flavors, as well as acidic flavors, and even like bolder, gamier characters. Now, in respect to that, with the steak, I'm actually going to pair with a sherry. Now, typically I like doing Oloroso sherry, but even this Pedro Jimenez, which is naturally a lot sweeter, goes really well with the blue cheese cream sauce because these pungent flavors go really well with something sweet. Now, vice versa, these classic gamier flavors from like lamb or steak or bison would go really, really well with Rioja wine. And with Rioja wine, again, you're getting this oxidized character. And if you were in our last class, oxidation is a tertiary flavor. It gives more mature flavors that are like leather, tobacco, like smokier flavors. And that, again, goes really well with something that would be barbecued, grilled, or even roasted. With the charcuterie board on the, let's see, on your left side, oh no, your right side, you're going to have deli meats that we created the spread. And I like it because it gives a little bit of variety in flavor, in meat, in richness, in different styles. You can add like hot capicola or spicy sopressata. You can do, like on the bottom, we use speck, which is almost like prosciutto de Parma, but smoky. And even with your cheese, you can really play around with these flavors because it's a quick way to set the table. You can build it the night before, you can buy everything in advance and just saran wrap it and you're ready to go. But it's a really fun way to get things going without taking up too much time during dinner time on the night of your holiday or your dinner. So assemble all these boards. This is really where it becomes fun. Again, it's your centerpiece. You want to make it lively, engaging, vibrant, spice it up with bright fruit like different kiwi slices, green grapes, or different garnishes to really liven it up. Oranges, orange slices would be really good to give you this satiation that both the acidic Pinot Gris and the Champagne are really going to play around with. It'll clean your palate, and then you can dive right back into some of these rich flavors, which are something that allows, it's almost like a Turkish bath for your palate, you know? You can go into something rich, go into something light, citrusy, and then creamy. And that creates this almost memory, this iconic experience that you all can share at the dinner table. And you can play around with it with your family. Which one goes better with which wine? And if you really want to go big, put it all together. So these are all the dishes that we have on that handout for you, but it's something where you can see the variety, the color, the versatility, and it's healthy. Like tasting and going through all of these food pairings, it doesn't have that traditional heavy holiday feeling where you're just like, at the end of dinner, you're having a hard time breathing in between food. This breaks it up. It's a little lighter. It's more like tapas. You can play around with it and have fun. And again, notice how even with the dessert wines, they go well with some of these other flavors that you wouldn't normally expect. So again, let me know what else you guys are tasting or maybe wanting to challenge in terms of pairing, because I know it can be tricky and also challenging. Jennifer Ostrom just asked, what would you suggest for egg dishes like quiche? Not the usual champagne, etc. That's tricky. So you're going to have naturally this creamy, cheesy, and salty flavor. I actually like the idea of doing something like a Fino sherry. If you want to go a little heavier, do that Oloroso that I was talking about. If you want something a little atypical, go with, like, again, matching flavor, because we're really looking at making sure that the richness in the body and the texture are being matched both by the food and the wine. So with quiche, it is a rich, sometimes a saltier food, depending if they're sausages or briny olives. And so, honestly, I like the idea of doing something like a white port, a little different. You can also keep it for a long time, but it allows for that saltiness to really play off of a gentle sweetness. It is citrusy, white port, but it's atypical. Now, with something a little more classic, I would actually go with, because I hear Chardonnay all the time, and I'm gonna steer away from it. I want to recommend something rich like a Viognier from either California or the south of France in the Rhone River. Viognier has this richness about it that is very comparable to Chardonnay, but it allows for you to have newer flavors. It allows for the food to shine through. So let's see. If you eat all the charcuterie, you won't have any room in the main meal, but it all looks yummy. Well, yumba. um, well, and that's the thing. This is a composition of everything. And absolutely, Jennifer, I got a lot more for you, so I'll keep thinking about it. With this dinner, this is kind of the composition of one or two main entrees, a bunch of sides, and the charcuterie board. It's to give it lively character, give you contrast and flavor and texture, but something different, something that you can really play with that you don't have to worry. So, for example, um, earlier on there was the Stella Rosa blueberry. Great with something like the sweetness will match with the jams, it'll match with the raisins and the saltiness from that. You can contrast it with the turkey sausage and the sauerkraut and really have some fun with it. But don't worry, play with what you have. Bring with bring the wines that you have, that you know and that you love, because that is also part of the story too. You really need the wines that you love, because not only do you love them, but you have a story behind it. And it contributes to the dinner that you're bringing with your loved ones. And if they haven't had it, it's a story to share. And hopefully everybody else will have their stories to contribute to. That's the time that we're looking for. The quality time, the time spent encouraging others to try new things and really have a moment with each other. And kind of segue into that, wine pairing tips. I know we kind of went through it, but let's go through some classic ones here. Classic pairings, we're going to talk about like the blue cheese and port. Iconic. Not necessarily take a bite out of blue cheese, maybe with some crackers and have it with port. But it's the pungent flavors from both the wine and the cheese that are a great compilation with each other. They allow for this almost explosion of flavors and really engaging your palate. Now, something that's almost the opposite of that is oysters in Sancerre. Now, Sancerre is a cool climate region in the north of France, known for Sauvignon Blanc. And with that cool climate character, almost like the Pinot Gris, but it's less sugar and more acidity. And it goes really beautifully with oysters, something salty, great seafood. Let's see, caviar and champagne. Now, everybody knows about caviar and champagne, not necessarily have tried it, but caviar in general is very salty and creamy. It's a very unique texture as well. And going with the champagne, the soil has a lot of chalk, creates a lot of salinity that comes from diatomaceous earth, which is basically leftover seabed of seashells that have been crushed over the years to make the chalk. And it both England, like the White Cliffs of Dover, as well as northern France, share that soil that creates that saltiness. Again, iconic with caviar. Sarah said she's moving on to gram 6. Oh, port. Yes, excellent. And port is fun. It's a great way to engage with salty flavors, not necessarily sweet for sweet, because sweet can be dangerous. We're going to look at that next. But with salty and rich flavors, it can be a really nice accessory. Now, we were talking a little bit earlier about lamb and Rioja, and it's very common to pair the two because they're both gamey, heavy, very complex flavors, both primary, secondary, and tertiary flavors. So they have fruit, they have oak, and they have this leathery, rich, almost like old cellar smell and flavor. And it doesn't sound necessarily appealing, but it is reminiscent. Whenever you go to some of these old cellars in Spain, anywhere in Europe, they have this thing called penicillin mold. Builds black all over the cellar walls and the bottles, and it has this distinctive smell that when you smell it, it's iconic. You just go, wow, like that flavor is resonating in the wine, and it's a good thing, promise. But it is a wonderful accoutrement for something that is gamey like lamb or hearty like steak. Now, talking about those Central Coast wines, we were looking at it earlier. Michael Jones, you were talking about it, that red blend. Paso Robles is kind of where I'm looking at. Barbecue and these rich red and white wines are amazing because barbecue in general out there is almost like this precious tradition that I came across during a road trip, and it has this um, really passionate um, complexity of flavors. It's sweet, it's herbaceous, it's both fruity and meaty, and because of that, the wines reciprocate something like that red blend. It's going to have jammy, rich, oxidative, and oaky flavors. So you're talking about a favorite Tempranillo. There's I love the region as a whole. It's the consistency of Tempranillo from Rioja is really famous from producers like, um, well, you have classic producers that we always look at. So Viña Tondonia, which is one of the oldest wineries out there. You have Cune and Muga. These vineyards, almost, let's say, a good portion of Rioja is a uh, it's a taste of time, really. You're going back in time because remember, they're aging these wines for you. So they age the wines that, like with Muga and you have like let's say Marquez de Riscal, they have deeper, older cellars. And they have to hold on to wines for like 10, 20 years, 30 years minimum, in order to achieve their flavor profile that they're really looking for. And again, um, the region as a whole is my favorite because all of these winemakers are looking at these styles and always innovating. And now with a lot of our forest fire troubles, this is also why I'm talking about Paso Robles because as far north as all the troubles that we've been having, Paso Robles is an opportunity where winemaking is hopefully going to shine in the next couple of years. They've always had a lot of challenges, but they're going to be quite the pioneer in the next couple of years. So lots more to look forward to with that. So pairings to avoid. Not. I wish there was a book, a book that we could look at and say, what's something rough? What's something that we encounter that can always be like whiplash on the palate? Tannic red wines and fish are one that kind of something that everybody knows, but not necessarily why. When you have something, let's say, like a heavy red wine that is tannic, it's a little bitter, it's no sugar and kind of unforgiving, it counteracts with the oiliness in the fish. It becomes very like with the richness of the fish and the tannins almost create this astringency and bitterness that are a little unforgiving. Now, with sweet wines, we always warn don't pair with it with something that's less sweet. So let's say with port, right? Um, don't do something like strawberry shortcake. Go a little bigger and richer, like black forest cake, fudge, or something rich, um, because they can be um, almost muted. If you have that strawberry shortcake, you might almost not taste the sweetness. Um, and Sarah, to answer your question, are there any reds that work with fish or no? Absolutely. But lean towards the higher acidity. That's what we're kind of encouraging with something like a Chianti Classico, or something cold. Remember, the farther north you are in the northern hemisphere, the cooler your red wines are. So, um, great example is like Burgundy. Burgundy has the propensity to be less tannic and a little more forgiving on the acidity. Well, a little more forgiving on that balancing in the Pinot Noir. Sorry to clarify, um, because it has this uh, gentle fruit-driven character that goes really well with fish. Other pairings that are a little, let's say, atypical would be like German Blaufränkisch. Um, I would do a heavier fish though. Typically, we talk about something that's like sautéed, pan-fried, right? But doing a baked fish will also help because you're adding richness to it. But you're almost like you're increasing the depth of the fish, the richness, the flavors, the aromatics, and so that way it matches really well with a heavier red wine. So that's kind of push and pull for you, but definitely something to look at. Um, I'll give you one more. It's a little atypical, but it is Pinotage from South Africa. Now, Pinotage, I like using with tomato sauce, something that has a higher acidity. Adding a fish dish with a tomato sauce can actually balance it out. So now the tomatoes itself are actually doing most of the pairing with your red wine instead of the fish itself. But it, again, elevates the richness of your dish and actually contributes to more of the flavors. So, oh, you know what? One more. Bitter foods and oily foods. Tannic red foods with oily foods are very similar to the fish paradox we were talking about. They create that almost bitterness that we were talking about that can be a little unsatiating. Now, with bitter foods like asparagus, fruity white wines can have a little difficulty. So sometimes we look at bitter white wines to pair with bitter food. So let's say asparagus and arugula with either Gruner Veltliner or a bitter Pinot Grigio from either, let's say, the Veneto or Pinot Gris from the Alsace, because they naturally have bitterness in the wine that kind of neutralize each other in flavor. So how to pair all of this food? What are we going to do? There's so many different things. I didn't want to give you eye for eye pairings because it's something where I want to give you a variety. These wines that we have, again, a nice sparkling rosé, a little bit more fruit driven, but it's not going to break the bank. And again, great for having guests to invite them. Pinotage. Sorry, I was reading Ben Forbes' suggestion on Pinotage. And you know what? That's kind of one of my back pocket suggestions. I love having Pinotage to talk about. But Pinot Gris is what I was talking about because its versatility, its weight and body, its fruit driven and acidity really goes well with food. Creamy Chardonnay gives you that gentle moment where you need a little bit more flavor from the wine, a little bit more texture, and goes really well with something like a heavier fish, as well as a creamier or a savory flavor. Chardonnay with maybe like a chicken piccata, that's what we're looking at, something that's very rich in flavor. Chianti Classico. If you want something a little heavier, go something like Montepulciano di Abruzzo, right? It's a little farther south in Italy. They're warmer climate. Anything in southern Italy generally tends to be richer, more sugary, but not like sugar, but has more residual sugar. And that can do a lot of wonderful things for like steak, grills, barbecue, a heavier dish. With cooler climate, like the Chianti, like let's say Barbaresco, Brunello's, you're looking at cold, tannic, but acidic wines. Definitely food friendly and really, how would you say it? Man, I'm stumbling. Food friendly and also oriented towards pairing because the acidity opens up your palate. It makes you hungry. It starts the digestive system and really gets those flavors pumping. So again, diversity in your wine and both acidity, acidic reds, acidic whites, and also sweet wines have the natural ability to really round out some of your pairings. But don't be afraid of them. I know like dessert wines or sweet wines, sometimes we can be hesitant about saying, oh, it's got to be a digestif, an after dinner drink, but you could have them. I definitely encourage having them during your saltiest part of the meal. Something a little atypical, but it goes into those flavors, the layers, and complexity. So this slide is kind of to round it all up and talk about it's a showpiece. It's something to really wow your guests and also give you a healthier alternative, give you some great variety and flavors, as well as some fun and really something to talk about. And creating memories is going to be the most important, which leads to holiday wine gifting. This one's going to be real brief, but I wanted to talk to you guys about gifting because when I was in retail, and I always would hear about birthdays, weddings, holidays. What do I do? I need a wine that's the age of that person. No, 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 no. Make it easy for yourself. We're looking at food-friendly wines because it's versatile. They're going to be great for dinner, especially if you're giving it for the holidays. You want something that they can have for dinner. All of these suggestions are going to be fun. They're going to be very different, a little atypical, but something that really will go well. With a birthday, I always like talking about gifting. And you're going to see this pretty classic wine bag in your stores. And then I like to fluff it up a little bit with some tissue paper. Makes it really fun, real festive, and it can be for any occasion. But with birthdays, I like giving something that people haven't tried. Because when you've had the wines that you're used to every day, day in and day out, you want something that'll engage your palate, that'll give you a new story. Those are the wines, those are the birthday gifts that surprise me, that'll go, wow, you just gave me a Junmai Daiginjo sake. I don't even know how to read this, but I want you to experience it because those are really momentous gifts. Same thing with holidays. These are food friendly for that reason. And with weddings, you can take a collection of these. We used to talk about 4 wines in together. You have your first anniversary, you do champagne. Your second anniversary, you do something hearty like a bolder Chardonnay that will last a couple years, or Pinot Gris that's fun, that's lively, that's worth celebrating with. Your third wine would be a nice heavy red wine, something like the Bordeaux we were talking about last week with bold Cabernet, something, or even like a Sauterne that can last a long time. With these ports and sherries, that's an also great accoutrement for the fourth wine, because those wines will last 30 years, maybe for to celebrate their first child's birth, or something that really marks a momentous occasion. And 30 years, no problem. But a little package of 4 makes it really intimate. And again, all of these wines are a great gift for that. And I want to wrap up with one of our last things and kind of engage you guys in your perspective, what you would like to see for another episode. Let's talk about New Year's, right? It's right around the corner. Are there questions that you have? Are there ideas that you want to explore? I know a lot of people talk about champagne and popcorn, and maybe we'll test it out because sometimes it's not the perfect pairing. So we can talk about pairings and we can talk about the different regions and styles, because champagne really is historical. It's iconic. It's momentous. It really engages everybody because it cleans the palate and really refreshes and kind of wipes out all the previous things that you've eaten. And almost the same idea with the New Year's. We want something that'll wash away all the last year's experiences and start fresh. So again, if you guys have some ideas, something atypical, maybe a sparkling we've never had that you're curious about, let us know and throw it in the chat, because I definitely am really curious, but I'm really excited to explore champagne with you guys and sparkling wines. But that's pretty much it for today. I want to also wrap it up for any other questions you guys might have, both with food pairings, double checking on the handout. When you click on the handout, that 5th button down below, it'll create a little pop-up and you'll see a little downward arrow pointing on a line. That's the download button. Click that and actually take a look at our handouts, because they're great little pieces for us, from us to you, that we created both for different pairing techniques and different ideas on the do's and do nots with the dinners. Benjamin Forbes just mentioned basics in champagne for those who don't know anything about it. You got it, because there's so much. It's a classic. It is something that not everybody gets a chance to try. And when you get to try it, it's hard to try a lot of it. And so having them side by side will actually give us a chance to taste a variety of flavors. Because if I were to say bready and brioche-like, yeasty and bubbly, or fruit-driven, they all describe sparkling wine. They all describe champagne. And I definitely look forward to pairing with you guys soon. So I want to wrap up by saying thank you guys and have you all thank our host at AARP Colorado. Without them, we wouldn't be here tasting, drinking, and enjoying each other's company. And again, I love the ideas that you guys have brought forth. We were talking about, let's see, Elizabeth Stanley recommends recommendations for Prosecco, where we can also talk about regions like Cornegliano, Valdobbiadene, get a little deeper, a little nerdier with our Prosecco, as well as talk about different Italian sparkling alternatives and sparkling red wine suggestions, which is, I love the challenge, Jennifer. It's going to be really tricky because not a lot of producers do it, but when they are, like sparkling Shiraz, they're a whole nother level. And I'm really excited that you guys brought up some of these ideas because we can go deep and we can have a lot of fun with them. So again, I want to thank you all for coming and joining us today. I had a great time, and we've got a little bit of time left. So if you want to throw out some more questions for me, I'll kind of wrap it up with all of your answers here. And thank you, Michael Jones. I love it. I will definitely thank my dad too. He's an amazing chef that wanted to contribute and make some fun things. He really took the challenge and ran with it. Amazing dude that, you know, when we create a menu, we can really innovate and have some fun. But again, take a look at the attachments on that fifth button. And if you are interested, I can make some more detailed notes on the recipes themselves for you guys for the holidays. All right. Again, thank you so much. I'm John Yu with Wine Walk Wednesdays. Hope to see you soon.